Generali, partner di vita.
Not too much to ask. Non è chiedere troppo. No es demasiado pedir. Esta es la pregunta que hemos propuesto en este ciclo de 3 entrevistas. ¿Por qué esta pregunta en este tiempo tan raro de crisis, de pandemia, de dolor, de preguntas y de cambios que nunca habíamos visto antes? ¿Por qué esta pregunta? Porque hemos intentado contactar con personas en el mundo, en diferentes países, en Italia, en España y llegando hasta Estados Unidos, personas que han hecho de esta circunstancia una oportunidad, una ocasión para su propia vida y su propia opinión sobre lo que estaba pasando. Por eso es interesante hacerse esta pregunta. El título es un verso de una canción de Bob Dylan. La canción se llama en inglés Floater, que cuenta la historia de un vagabundo que al final de su vida un amigo le hace la pregunta, ¿pero esto no es demasiado pedir? Y él dice, no, no es demasiado pedir. En este sentido, la tercera entrevista es algo especial en comparación con las dos anteriores, porque vamos a tener a dos personajes muy conocidos en Estados Unidos. Uno es profesor en Harvard, Cornel West, afroamericano, y a Robert George, que es profesor en Princeton. Los dos, desde posiciones diferentes, desde pensamientos diferentes entre ellos, muestran una especie de amistad imposible entre ellos. Bellísima. En una parte de la entrevista cantan juntos. Ellos se reconocen porque entienden que tienen una lucha interior, tienen un fuego interior que les permite tener una conversación. Y de esto y de otras muchas cosas habla esta entrevista, que ha sido posible gracias a José Medina y todo su equipo. Que disfruten.
I love her well, my little darling, my Creole belle. When stars do shine, I'm glad she's mine. My little darling, my Creole belle. I arrived in 1985 and began my teaching career here in Princeton. And I think Cornel arrived in the early 1990s. When was it, Cornel?
I arrived in Princeton in 88.
88?
Yes,
Okay, 88.
Yeah.
So, of course, he was a very well-known figure from the moment he walked onto the campus. He had already made his reputation. And I was very interested in hearing what he had to say. Everyone was interested in hearing what Professor West had to say. I always appreciated what he was saying. I would often disagree with the conclusions he was drawing, but I always felt he was the guy who was putting his finger on exactly the right question. In intellectual life, 99% of the problem is getting to the right question. Most of the time we don't get there, so we end up wasting a lot of time and breath and energy. But Cornel could always put his finger on the right question, and I admired that. So we would occasionally engage with each other across the seminar table. I believe once or twice we got together for lunch in the 1990s, but that's not when we really got acquainted. That was later.
No, indeed. There was a wonderful young brother named Andrew who had taken both of our classes. Andrew Perlmutter, I think his name is. He'd founded a new magazine called Green Light. It was that next to last paragraph of F. Scott Fitzgerald's great classic, The Great Gatsby. Gatsby believed in the green light. And this magazine was going to be an example of what it means to really take intellectual life seriously at Princeton. And he asked me, he said, we want to have dialogue between professors, and we want to start with you. Who would you like to interview? I said, oh, I'd love to talk to Brother Robbie, even though I don't know him. I said, Robert George. He said, oh, that's fine. So he goes to talk to Robbie, and Robbie says, sure, I'd love to be in dialogue. And we had the most magnificent conversation for the magazine in the original issue, the first issue, the inaugural issue. And then after, we walked to Brother Robbie's car, and we talked another 2 hours or so. About 45 minutes, Robbie's got his hand right there on the door. And we were still going at Plato and Aristotle, whatever it was, Kant, Aquinas, Kierkegaard, whoever it was, we just going at it. And so it was then we decided that we had to teach together. And thank God Shirley Tillman decided to have freshman seminars and was really encouraging professors to teach together. But that's what I love about Brother Robbie. See, Robbie, he bears witness first by saying what he means and means what he says. That's already a breakthrough in this culture. You got so many people saying things they don't believe. They pose and posture in order to wear a mask in order to pursue their careers and opportunities. That's spiritual emptiness. It's moral vacuity. You can never believe what they say. Brother Robbie, whether he's right or wrong, he goes come from the heart and so. And so often we agree at that deep level. There's no doubt about it. He wants to fight poverty. He has his ways of doing it. I want to fight poverty. I have my ways of doing it. He wants to keep track of the humanity of persons by means of their sanctity and dignity. He has his wonderful ways to do it. I have my ways. So we have so much in common because he's got an integrity, really. And that's a beautiful thing.
Well, he's described himself. He says describing me, but I mean, this is one of the things I love and admire about my brother. He means what he says and says what he means. There's no posturing. He doesn't have a brand, right? People say, what's your brand? Well, I don't know what the Cornel West brand is, because sometimes what he has to say is going to offend this crowd, and sometimes it's going to offend that crowd, and sometimes it's going to offend the other crowd. Before it's over, he's got them all offended. Oh, yeah. But he's going to say what he means, because he's not there trying to perform or please anybody. He's not there to try to get applause. He's there to tell the truth. And my goodness, I resonate to that. And I want to be like that. I try to emulate that. I mean, he's a good role model. He may be wrong about some things, but he's a great
and
role
I am
model
wrong
when it
about
comes
some
to
things. I just haven't discovered exactly
what they are. I have to tell you a funny story. So a couple of years ago, Cornel and I were invited to do a dialogue address the freshman parents orientation day. So the new students were here with their moms and dads. We were in a big auditorium, it seats about 500. And we got going on the question we were supposed to address, which was, what is the point of a Princeton education? What is the point of a liberal arts education? And so I gave my little account of that. I gave my little theory of what a liberal arts education was for. And when I finished, Cornel began, and he simply said, "You have come to Princeton to learn how to die." And I saw some parents start like this, like, what is this all about? Now, wait a minute, hang on here. $70,000 a year to learn how to die. So Cornel gave it with an actor's sense. You know, he is actually an actor. He's been in movies. With an actor's sense of timing, he gave it a moment, and then he explained, "You're here to learn how to die so that you will learn how to live. You cannot know how to live unless you learn how to die, because it's, as the Greeks taught, as the ancient Greek philosophers taught, it's from the perspective of your death that you can see what really matters and what really doesn't matter. If you look at things from the perspective of the tombstone, you're going to care about faith and family and friendship and honesty and integrity and virtue. If you don't do that, if you fail to look at it from that perspective, then the ephemeral and secondary things will preoccupy you. Money, status, prestige, influence, power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Brother Robbie and I are fundamentally rooted in the Socratic legacy of Athens and the prophetic legacy of Jerusalem. And so Socrates, for us, is an exemplar, the highest level of intellectual integrity, which is the courage to scrutinize yourself, to examine yourself, to learn how to die in order to learn how to live by calling into question certain assumptions and presuppositions you have. And when you let go of those assumptions, that's a form of death in order for you to be reborn into a stronger person who can be a force for good. Now, of course, Socrates never sheds a tear, he never cries, so something's wrong with him. You see, when Jesus weeps, Socrates never cries. That's a qualitative leap in terms of what is happening regarding the conception of what it is to be human. Because somebody who's never shed a tear has never really loved a person. So Socrates exemplifies intellectual integrity, but he doesn't open himself up to be vulnerable. And you can't love without being vulnerable. It's like Hamlet, suffering from the inability to love, given all those wonderful 8 soliloquies. Well, see, Jesus weeps the way Jeremiah does, so he's got a deep love, a willingness to sacrifice, to donate himself, empty himself, give himself, sacrifice himself. But Robbie and I, we riding both at the same time. So we don't give up on Socrates just because he's not shedding a tear. No. He's still exemplary, but he falls short. But then with Jesus, you get the culmination of it all in terms of the embrace of that love of truth and that love of beauty and that love of goodness and the love of God.
Well, I think the foundation of the bond between us that makes it so special, more than a friendship, as Cornel rightly said, is the bond of truth-seeking. We both caught that bug. You maybe would call it a fever, a desire for the truth early in our lives. And it has been like what Socrates calls the daimon. It's there pushing us, always there prodding us. The first big breakthrough in my intellectual life was reading Plato, specifically the dialogue Gorgias, when I was an undergraduate. Transformative. I felt as though Plato had turned on a powerful light in a dark room. I didn't realize the room was dark. I thought I was seeing everything just fine.
Exactly.
And then I read Gorgias, and suddenly I see things in an entirely different light, and understand for the first time that I'd been focusing on some of the wrong things. I'd been paying attention to what was secondary and derivative and merely instrumentally useful, and not paying attention to what was fundamental and intrinsically valuable, like the pursuit of knowledge, like true friendship and brotherhood, like beauty, like faith, these kinds of things. Then, of course, like Cornel, I had wonderful teachers. I mean, I owe my teachers everything. I mean, the meager way I try to repay the people who transformed my life as teachers is to try to do for my students something roughly approaching what they did for me. I can never actually reach it, but I try. When I was an undergraduate at Swarthmore College, the professor who had the most important role in my life was a person named James Kurth. Now that was interesting because he was a political science professor who taught in the areas of international relations and foreign policy. These were not subjects that were especially interesting to me. I was interested in philosophy and political theory and ethics, and yet what I saw in him was a role model. Someone who thought deeply and critically and above all independently, who didn't follow the crowd.
Absolutely.
Who asked questions about the orthodoxies that were accepted on our college campus and more broadly in the community of the elite, of the sophisticated. And that was exhilarating to see, and it was inspiring.
One of the things that really brings me and Brother Robbie together as fellow Christians and as deep brothers, which is even deeper than friendship. We've got to go beyond Aristotle here. We're talking about very deep brotherhood at the deepest level, is a certain profound suspicion of forms of dogmatism and orthodoxy. It could be liberal orthodoxy, it could be conservative, it could be Marxist, even forms of Christian orthodoxy. And here we would invoke Chesterton's great work of 1908, where the doctrines get ossified and petrified, and you lose sight of the loved and the lived experience with neighbor that requires us to engage in kenosis, in that emptying and giving of ourselves, you see. And you see that even Jesus, vis-a-vis the law of his day, as it were, you see, somehow he's got to keep track of something deeper in the law without trashing the law. He's going to transform, transfigure, and fulfill the law. And so in our time, you know, we've got so many orthodoxies and forms of dogmatism that we have to resist in that way. But I think the first problem is you got to convince people that they are in need of being liberated. Because people are socialized in such a way that they think that the dominant forms in the world are the forms of freedom itself. They think they're already free. You see, I mean, T.S. Eliot has a wonderful line in Burt Norton. He says, we moderns are distracted from distractions by distractions. So you get a culture of weapons of mass distraction. They're conformed to the distractions and they think they're free and they're living on the surface. Superficial lives. Hollow men, Eliot. You begin to see the ways in which this temperament and sensibility of being anti-orthodoxy, anti-dogmatism, brings together a brother from West Virginia in love with St. Thomas Aquinas and others, and a brother from the chocolate side of Sacramento, Baptist, Shiloh Baptist Church. And here we are, common ground, faithful unto death. And not only that, but having a good time with each other. So we have joy and fun together. That's very important too. You got to have joy and fun, that sense of beauty. He's playing his guitar and I'm singing out of tune. You know, you have that sense of engaging in the various dimensions of life. We go see his wonderful family, he sees my family. And so for that kind of coming together, that's what brotherhood and sisterhood resides, it seems to me, in a world dominated by so much orthodoxy and dogmatism and forms of domination.
You had great teachers, Cornel.
Oh my God, yes, good God Almighty. Beginning, I mean really going all the way back to third grade, Mrs. Saul and Mrs. Angel. Just teaching a love of the life of the mind, deep investment of self and heart and soul and body. So by the time I get to college, though, I've got Robert Nozick and John Rawls and Hilary Putnam and Stanley Cavell. We're just, you know, overwhelmingly blessed to see, most importantly, exemplars. And they weren't role models in the abstract sense, you know. People talk about role models these days, somebody to imitate. No, an exemplar is somebody who provides a concrete enactment of certain virtues and ways of life that sees something deep inside of you. See, role model these days is a market conception of some transactional relation you have with somebody who's going to allow you to move X, Y, and Z. No. An exemplar is going to change your life and allow you, like a jazz musician, to find your voice. You've been an echo all your life. Don't be an extension of the echo chamber. Who are you? Monk used to say, play yourself. That's what he told Coltrane. That's what he was told. Learn how to play yourself. Quit imitating these other jazz musicians. Well, so it is. That's what Robbie and I do to our students. We want you to find your voice. Your voice is like your fingerprint. Nobody like you. Nobody has your voice but you. Quit imitating. Quit being a copy. Quit being a simulacra. Quit being a semblance. Who are you? People might look and say, I don't really know. Join the club. Because we all in process. Play your guitar, brother. Play your guitar, brother. I was blessed to co-write a song with a genius and funk master named Bootsy Collins. It just came out a couple of months ago. It's called Stars. And we have a line that says, stars don't have a name, they just shine. And what Brother Robbie was talking about with deep insight is so crucial, because when you have a fire inside of you, grounded in a calling that's bigger than you, then you want to be a star, but not a star in the market culture of applause and name and fame. But you want to be a star who cultivates a fire and a light that shines in a dark world. And Robbie and I sing a song called "This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine." See, if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, there ought to be a little heaven behind. That you leave that light inside of you in the form of your presence, the gifts that you have, you give to others, the words that you speak, the words that you write, and the life that you live. So when they look at you, they say, "Oh, I see Brother Robbie's light. He's a star. He's still shining. He's still shining. He's still shining. How's my light doing, Brother Robbie? How's my light, brother? Oh, no, it's about to go out. No, I got to keep that light shining, tied to a God who is loving us, and we trying to somehow enact that love that we see in that Jesus in that regard, you see. And so it does pit us very much over against the dominant ways of the world, the market ways of the world, the mercantile ways of the world, and so forth and so on.
I can't understand completely the mystery of the magic of this brotherhood, this friendship, this love. But I can tell you this. He understands me in ways that people who are generally regarded as being on my side of the political or ideological divide do not understand me. And I have a feeling I understand
that's
him.
True. That's true. We hear it from my mother.
We can open up to each other, and sometimes I know what he's going to say before he says it. Now, how that's happening, I don't know. How I know what's going on in his heart and in his head and what he's wrestling with, and where I need to say a word, maybe of comfort or something like that. Or when I need one and there he is on the phone, telling me something I need to hear. I don't know how that magic happens. Yes, there's the shared faith. That's very important.
Yeah.
There's the shared love of ideas. There's the shared concern about issues, whether they're profound and perennial issues, what is the nature of justice, what is the nature of truth, or the particular issues, what do we do now in the wake of the George Floyd murder and the uprisings and so forth. We share these things, but there's a depth of understanding of each other, and I don't know what to say beyond that. I can't really put my finger on it, but it's there. I know him. He knows me.
That's very, very true.
There's nothing I can't share with him. There's nothing that I fear that I would be making myself vulnerable or putting myself at risk if I shared this thought or idea or fact about myself or something that happened with him. There's a trust, and I know
Absolutely.
he trusts me in the same way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's incredibly rare.
Yeah, it's rare in my own life.
And to use just a small minor incident, when I get arrested in various places based on the same Christian vocation, my brother's the first one to call to pay the bail. And I got a lot of left-wing comrades. Oh, I got a lot of left-wing comrades, got nice analysis, so clear and so courageous on television. When I get the phone call for this brother, I know it's for real, you see? And that's just at that deep level of just human communion, connection, and so forth and so on, you see. And that's just what it is to be brothers, I think, in that way.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. So back in 2016, I was elected chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, working on trying to shape U.S. foreign policy in a way that would help the cause of persecuted people of all faiths. Whether we're talking about Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, or we're talking about Tibetan Buddhists in China, or we're talking about Christians in Vietnam or North Korea. And so I was going to be sworn in by Chief Justice Roberts at the Supreme Court of the United States. And the first thing that came to my mind was, well, I want my brother Cornel to hold the Bible for me when I'm sworn in. And then the second thought I had is I want to be sworn in on an important Bible. Now, all Bibles are important. If it's the Bible, it's important. But I wanted to see if I could find a historically significant Bible, the Bible of a great champion, someone I admire. And so I thought, I'm sure Harriet Tubman must have had a Bible. So I got in touch with the Harriet Tubman House in New York, Auburn, New York, on the Underground Railroad. And I said, my name is Robert George. I'm a professor at Princeton University, and I'm going to be sworn in as chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom at the Supreme Court of the United States on a certain day. And I was just wondering if I could borrow Harriet Tubman's Bible. I've looked up online, you know, the artifacts that you have, and I found that the Bible does exist and that you have it up there. And just for a second there was silence on the other end of the line, and then it popped into my head right in that split second to say, and I'm going to be sworn in with my friend Professor Cornel West holding the Bible. And the lady on the other side said, we would be honored to have you be sworn in on Harriet Tubman's Bible. We will ship it down to you and make all the arrangements for it to come down to you and make all the arrangements for you to safely get it back to us. So they shipped down the Bible. Big, beautiful Bible. It's an amazing thing to think of. It must have cost that woman she was a poor woman. I mean, Harriet Tubman was not a rich woman. It tells you about her faith that she would have purchased such an expensive,
Absolutely.
Beautiful Bible as this. But anyway, it came and I had this treasure. Cornel and I met and we went over to the Supreme Court and we walked up the steps toward the Marble Temple, the Supreme Court. And we're talking, I've got that great big Bible under my arm. And I noticed that Cornel catches the eye of a police officer and he catches Cornel's eye, and they look at each other in a somewhat unfriendly way, suspicious way. So I didn't say anything. I waited till we were out of earshot from the police officer, and I said, Brother Cornel, what was that about back there with the police officer? And he said, well, Brother Robbie, that's the officer who arrested me about a month ago when I was down here demonstrating in front of the Supreme Court. He said, you know, as a matter of fact, I've never been to the Supreme Court before except when I was going to be arrested.
And now we're going in the Chief Justice John Roberts' chambers with his precious parents. That was a culminating moment. Both of them sitting there.
Harriet Tubman's Bible.
With that Harriet Tubman's Bible. And we had a good time with Brother Roberts, too.
Yes, we did.
He was very kind. In fact, he showed us around places he probably should not have showed us because nobody's supposed to go, but he was kind enough to embrace us in that way. But that was a Kairos moment. That was a special moment.
And it was an honor for me, of course, and such a blessing that I was there and Cornel held the Bible for me, and I was sworn in to a position that made me have a special responsibility for upholding the rights of precious human beings who were being persecuted for their faith. It was a very moving experience. I'm
Very
so
much so.
blessed.
That was a
Cornel,
deep.
were we allowed to?
Just yeah, that's right. I forgot. That's right.
That was a special coronavirus shot.
The governor will arrest us.
I forgot I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Let me ask you something now, Brother Cornel.
Uh-huh.
Put it under a basket. No.
No, I'm gonna let it shine. No, no, no. Put it under a basket. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Put it under a basket. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it it shine, let it shine. Here it come, here it come. My Lord, give it to me. So I'm gonna let it shine. I'll say, my Lord, give it to me. I'm gonna let it shine. My Lord, give it to me. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh yeah. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Have a little solo over there now.
Play your guitar, brother. Play your guitar, brother. There it is, there it is. Woo! Ha, ha.
Oh yeah. Well, this little light of mine. Well,
I'm gonna let it shine.
yeah, this little light of mine.
I'm gonna let it shine.
Yeah, this little light of mine.
I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
How about our keyboards man now?
Go! That's it.
Oh yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Oh!
Well done. You have used the word profit multiple times in this conversation. And I'm really curious as to like how you define a profit. What makes a profit?
That guy. There. Profit.
No, I mean, the prophet is someone who feels a deep calling for something bigger than her or him that leads them to want to empty themselves in terms of the life they live, art they have to present, whatever form of witness that they're willing to put forward. And so it begins with tradition. You have to have a wince in order to have a prophet. There's no such thing as a prophet without tradition. Because the tradition is a source from which the voice and vocation, not echo and profession. More and more, our culture is about echoes to the echo chambers. It's about professionals, how many prizes they won, how many titles they have. Take somebody like Sam Cooke, never won a Grammy. He's gonna live forever. Not one Grammy in his whole life. Curtis Mayfield, never won one Grammy. Milli Vanilli won 2. You see, that's the world's category. You see,
I think Borges never got a Pulitzer, right?
oh, no. Joyce, Tolstoy, Conrad, never Nobel Prize in Literature. The greatest literary novelist never won Nobel Prize. So in other words, the world has these little prizes and categories and labels and so forth, and people get invested rather than in what they're calling and finding their own voice. Sam Cooke found his own voice. And he's just one example, but we can go on and on in that regard. So that a prophetic figure is what I would call it comes close to what my Catholic brothers and sisters call a saint. But I understand a saint as a sinner who looks at the world through the lens of the heart. Because every saint got a funky past. Just like every sinner could have a magnificent future. But the saint is true to the calling that connects heart, mind, soul to the best of their tradition with a hypersensitivity to the suffering of others and a willingness to pay the ultimate cost, to live and die for that cause. And it comes in all forms, I think, in all folks.
Prophets sometimes can see the future, but that's not what makes them prophets. The reason they can sometimes see the future is that they understand the past. And that's what makes them prophets. It's understanding the heritage, understanding the tradition, understanding the principles. A prophet is always in the business of calling back, reminding, saying you've strayed from the path, which suggests that there is a path, and we used to know about the path, or at least we used to know something about the path. It's the opposite of the French Revolutionary idea that everything in the past is bad, you got to start from scratch. Yep. No, the prophet, whether it's the prophets of the Bible, or it's the prophetic figures like Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Martin Luther King, Abraham Joshua Heschel. The prophets understand what the sound principles were that we used to understand, even if we didn't live up to them, and are calling us to live up to them.
We began with the green light.
Yeah.
Scott, he went to Princeton and booted out with him. But he was one of the great literary U.S. prophets, because he could see that in America, without the Socratic legacy of Athens and prophetic legacy of Jerusalem, was simply a land that fetishized the future. Obsessed with tomorrow. That is America. I mean, John Dewey defined American pragmatism as the only philosophical tradition in the West that ascribes futurity metaphysical status. That's why pragmatism is only about effects and consequences. It's not about grounds or beginnings, where it comes from.
I think this is 100% correct. Capitalism can and has lifted, millions of people out of poverty.
Absolutely.
But a pure market system that is not constrained and shaped by virtues, by moral norms, by understandings that the market can't give, and actually government can't give, that only families, institutions of civil society, families assisted by churches and other religious organizations can give. In the absence of virtue, it simply won't work. It becomes self-destructive. It creates injustice.
But then beyond that, Brother Robbie's point is, how do you sustain the best kind of social experiments, which have been democratic experiments? And without having the spiritual and moral stuff that's required for human beings to become citizens, not consumers, not spectators, and so forth. Citizens who are ruling themselves, who govern themselves. It's a tremendous, tremendous project, you see. And you need all the weaponry that you can get. And we're living in a world now where these democratic experiments are slowly coming to an end. The neo-fascisms in the form of hatred, in the form of the rule of big money and big military and so forth, are becoming more and more popular because people are looking for order. They're feeling as if there's no security, there's no grounds of any kind of stability, you see. And so, part of our challenge these days is to be true to the best of our spiritual and moral heritage. It must be the primacy of the spiritual and the moral that then allows us to engage in relations with others with strong public life. And then we're back to possibilities of democracy. Public life, public conversation, public schools and so forth and so on. The various ways in which what connects us can bring out the best in us, knowing that the worst in us is always already there. Reinhold Niebuhr used to say democracy is a proximate solution to insoluble problems. Because you're never going to do away with fear, anxiety, insecurity in the human condition, ever.
Well, I'm going down the road now. Take my rider by my side. Going down the road now. Hey, take my rider by my side. Still buy a house, baby, on the riverside.
Blues is a personal narrative of a catastrophe lyrically expressed. So you're on intimate terms with catastrophe. You respond with compassion and creativity in a spirit of humility, but with style and with a smile. See what I mean?
That's good. I went down to the crossroads, baby. Tried to catch a ride.
So B.B. King would sit on his chair and say, nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be driving too. See, that's catastrophe. That's like Antigone in Sophocles' classic, right? Antigone got everything against her, and he's dependent on his mama. Mama might be driving, but he's playing with Lucille, with Robert Johnson and the others, the tradition coming through him. And he's got style. And style is not external. It's a soul wrestling that he does that allows him to give as a gift to all of us as human beings. And that's what Coltrane's talking about, really. The blues at its highest level is a love supreme that is almighty in the face of a world with a whole lot of hatred that's mighty. You're gonna have to have that connection to make it through that dark and grim. That's what when we're talking about Dylan, you know. Robert Zimmerman out of Minnesota. Blues man to the core. All that catastrophe he's working with in his own life and his sensitivity for the suffering of others. Here's the gift. One of the things the blues should teach us is that we should never be surprised by evil, whatever form it takes. And you should never be paralyzed by despair. He who should never despair that never lived. Despair is inescapable, unavoidable, and it's a brook of fire that one must walk through in life. So the question becomes, how do you fortify yourself to deal with what is coming your way? Now, part of the question in America is Americans view themselves as innocent, so they figure catastrophe is alien to them. No, catastrophe is on its way to your house. Your mama gonna die. Your friend gonna betray you. You got white supremacy, the male supremacy is gonna come at you. You know, you're gonna have to deal with poverty of some sort. Material, psychic, spiritual, whatever. It's on its way to your house. And now that the whole world has the blues, it's almost as if you become a blues person, which means you become a wounded healer and lover, or you become a wounded hater and trasher. That's the fork in the road of everybody's life. Everybody got wounds. What you gonna do with them? You gonna be a wounded lover and helper and healer, or you gonna be a wounded hater, trasher, and reinforce more wounds in the world?
I don't know the words. Hallelujah.
You have to run, y'all.
One more hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Finally done here.
Hallelujah. I belong to the band. I don't know the words. Something like what? Talking about I was going down there with the band.